The Doctor. In the TARDIS. Next stop, everywhere.
Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to Next Stop Everywhere, the Doctor Who podcast. I'm your host, Charles Skaggs, at least I think I am, back in the TARDIS once again, ready to talk some classic Doctor Who, although this time we're going to talk modern Doctor Who with one of our favorite special guest companions. He's always welcome here. You've heard him before when we've talked Inferno and The Girl Who Waited. Welcome back to Next Stop Everywhere, Lee Leonard.
Hey, Charles. How you doing, man?
Doing good, and I appreciate you kind of playing through. You're kind of a little handicapped, a little under the weather, but I appreciate you kind of manning up and joining us back here in the TARDIS.
Yeah, man. I got to power through it for the show.
You are. You're stepping up to the plate, and I really appreciate it. So
I would not let you down.
I wouldn't think you would, and you never have, and you're always a great fun to talk to. And I know it's been a while since we've had you here on Next Stop Everywhere, so what better time to welcome you back? And what we're going to talk about here at episode 160, a little special benchmark here, The Waters of Mars.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a very interesting episode. This was, of course, the autumn 2009 special that came out. So kind of like the third of 5 David Tennant specials that ranged from the end of 2008 all the way through New Year's Day of 2010, because David Tennant couldn't be bothered to do an actual final proper season. This one written, of course, by Russell T. Davies and Phil Ford, who later wrote the Peter Capaldi story Into the Dalek. But primarily he's known for the Sarah Jane Adventures, and he's written several adventures of those. A couple of notable ones, Enemy of the Bane, which was the very first story of the Sarah Jane Adventures, and The Last Sontaran, which I thought was a particular highlight. And this one also directed by Graham Harper, one of my favorite directors from the classic era and the modern era, director of such great episodes as The Caves of Androzani and The Stolen Earth Journey's End. So a great director to bring back for this one. So Lee, before we get started, kind of catch us up. What have you been up to, and what made you decide you wanted to talk about The Waters of Mars?
Well, if you can't tell from previous episodes that I've picked, I'm a big fan of the dark side of Doctor Who.
Right.
And I think this may be about as dark as it gets.
Yes.
I don't know if you agree with me there, but
with the possible exception of the Valyard.
Yeah. I mean, we have somebody committing suicide on Doctor Who, and I don't know if you've. I mean, I guess was it the Image of the Fendal where he hands the guy a gun?
Yeah, something like sounds about right. Yeah.
I think that's really the only time you see anything as dark as this, and man, was this scary. And I love horror movies, and this is about as horror in Doctor Who as I think you're going to get. So that's why I chose this one.
Yeah, it's like the third act of this one, like Lee said, takes a really dark turn once the Doctor brings Adelaide and Mia and I forget who else he brought back. Yuri, yes, thank you very much. Brings them back to Earth, changing, of course, the flow of history, and Adelaide decides she needs to kind of straighten the course a little bit. And her solution is not just to hide out, never to be seen again. Her solution is to kill herself.
Sure.
And that's one of the things we'll talk about here in our main topics.
That's what you do.
Yeah, that's what you do. Yeah, it's kind of an extreme solution. I'm thinking she probably could have come up with a better one. But because suicide is not the answer, believe it or not. Even if you're trying to set the web of time back on the straight and narrow. All right. So this story. So you enjoyed this one because it shows the darker side of Doctor Who. I'm guessing you really enjoyed David Tennant's performance. We'll talk about that here shortly. But yeah, it's a very surprising turn for Tennant. He essentially,
for Doctor Who.
For Doctor Who, really, because he kind of embraces his own godhood, so to speak.
Yeah, I think when I saw this episode for the first time, I was like, "Oh wow, Doctor Who just grew up."
Right.
This isn't your little kid Doctor Who anymore. And I couldn't imagine if I had had kids and watched this with my kids at the time. I don't think my kids would take a bath for a month after this.
Yeah, because obviously you're afraid of water because we get the introduction of the flood.
Yeah,
a new villain that we'll talk about here as well. And then the other topic I want to talk about, obviously, we're going to talk the Time Lord Victorious. We're going to talk the flood. And then, obviously, I want to talk about all the people on Bowie Base 1. And that's what we'll start off with here in a minute. So, guest cast this time. We kind of our special guest companion for this episode. Not just you being a special guest companion. Lindsay Duncan, who is a very interesting actress. I first kind of noticed her because I watched HBO's Rome.
Oh.
I was a big fan of that series, and she played Servilia in that, and she was a very interesting character. But she's also done things like she's played Lady Smallwood on Sherlock, which was kind of a recurring role, if you're a Sherlock fan. She did the voice of TC-14 in Star Wars The Phantom Menace. This was the droid at the very beginning of The Phantom Menace that kind of is carrying out a little serving tray. Kind of looks like C-3PO, but a silver C-3PO. And it's very trippy to kind of realize that that's Lindsay Duncan in all this.
Yeah, I put that out of my mind.
A lot of people have put Phantom Menace out of their mind. I just did a rewatch with my wife because we're kind of going through the entire Skywalker saga and build up to the Rise of Skywalker. And Phantom Menace is not aging well, to say the least.
No.
And then she was also in the movies Alice in Wonderland and Alice Through the Looking Glass, the recent 2010 era versions. With Johnny Depp as the Mad Hatter, Mia Wieslowski as Alice, which is a mouthful to say. So, but she's really good in those as well. So here she plays Captain Adelaide Brooke, a woman that kind of holds her own with the Doctor, but has some flaws. Obviously, the decision to commit suicide is one of those flaws. And we'll get more into her character here shortly. We also had Gemma Chan, who plays Mia Bennett. And she's gone on to kind of a little bit more acclaim since this story, Waters of Mars. She's going to be Cersei in Marvel's upcoming The Eternals movie. And this is hot on the heels of her playing one of the Kree warriors, Min-Erva, in the Captain Marvel movie. And she's also been in Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, among other things. She was on the TV show Humans. So after this story, Waters of Mars, I mean, she doesn't really have a major role here in this one, but she's gone on to more notable things, obviously. And I think she's going to be one of the more prominent stars, obviously, in the Eternals, playing Cersei. Peter O'Brien plays Ed Gold, is notable because he played John Howlett, the father of Wolverine, in X-Men Origins Wolverine. If you're an X-Men geek, he's also on the TV show Gossip Girl, which I did not watch, but some of you out there may be fans of that series, so that's why I mentioned it. Sharon Duncan-Brewster played Maggie Cain, one of the crew, and she played Senator Pamlo in Rogue One, a Star Wars story. So another Star Wars connection here in this one. Chuk Sibtain played Tarek Ital, and that's the doctor, one of the doctors that gets taken over early in the story. turned into one of the Flood. He played a character named Mark Grantham in the Sarah Jane Adventures story Warriors of Kudlak. And he played a character named David Brock in a Sixth Doctor Big Finish audio adventure, The Feast of Axos, which is a particular fun one I enjoyed. He also played the dual roles of Brian and the Cognoscenti in a 10th Doctor Big Finish audio Technophobia, which we've reviewed here on Next Stop Everywhere. And we also have Cosima Shaw as Steffi Ehrlich. She was in the movie V for Vendetta, interestingly enough. And she was also in the BBC version of Dirk Gently. Not Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency, but the little known adaptation starring Stephen Mangan as Dirk Gently. So I thought I'd mention that. And of course we have Paul Casey as Ood Sigma, returning once again. So I thought I'd mention him as well. A little bit of trivia before we get started. Dr. Spacesuit in this one is the exact same one he wore in the Satan Pit and was later seen in the episodes Hide, Kill the Moon, Listen, and The Girl Who Died. Hopefully he's washed it in the interim. Because, ew. This story at the end, if you notice, has a special dedication to Barry Letts, one of the classic great producers of Doctor Who in the classic era, especially during the John Pertwee era. Former writer and producer who died in October 2009, shortly before this story aired. And this story, The Waters of Mars, interestingly enough, won the 2010 Hugo Award for Best Dramatic Presentation Short Form. So whatever you may think of this episode, if you love it, if you hate it, it actually won an award, and a decent one at that. So credit to Doctor Who getting that one. So hooray for that. All right, so let's get into our main topics before I put Lee to sleep over here.
Never.
All right, so topic number one, let's talk the 10th Doctor, and let's talk about the Bowie Base 1 crew. So that's obviously going to be Adelaide Brooke, Mia Bennett, Ed Gold, Maggie Cain, Tarek Ital, and Steffi, and all the rest. And, the professor, Marianne, all the rest of the characters in this one. So so I know it's kind of a broad topic, but there's a lot going on. So what was we have the 10th Doctor traveling to Mars, and he comes across Bowie Base 1, doesn't realize it until he actually goes inside, and he's confronted with the ethical dilemma of like, oh, these people are destined to die rather quickly. I need to leave.
Clearly, the TARDIS doesn't have a time and date readout like the DeLorean does, because
pretty much,
he should have known that when he got there.
How is it that Doc Brown can invent something like that, but the Time Lords can't?
Yeah, right. Yeah, maybe it's just that Type 40 TARDIS is too old.
Could be. I mean, he kind of did have that in the in Paul McGann's 1996 TV movie. He did with a little TV set that he could bring down on the little extension. And
right.
So at least had a display saying what time it was or was supposed to be. But then he got rid of it. So go figure. Yeah. Guess he thought it was too easy. So what did you think of this? The Doctor coming across Bowie Base 1 and his initial interactions with the crew.
Well, I'm going to say that, to begin with, I love this episode. This is one of my top maybe 5 Doctor Who episodes of all time.
Oh, wow.
And I will say that each time I watch it, it doesn't age as well. I hate to say that. But you know what, Charles? Whenever I get on this show with you,
yes,
I come with my favorites, right?
That's all right. That's why we like having you on, Lee.
But then I have to analyze them, and it kind of breaks them for me a little bit. That makes me sad, but it's okay. It's worth it for the show.
I appreciate you being objective. So
this move into
I do the same thing. There's a lot of episodes that I've talked about here that I kind of wish would be also aging better than they have. Some do, but some not so much. So
and you have to do this every week. So
yeah,
I think the move to HD, it really kind of made some of it look pretty god awful.
Right.
When he first comes across the Bowie base, it just looks like a really kind of cheap matte painting in the background.
Right.
But I have so little complaints about this, but I can't help it. It's just the way I tend to see things. It's all the flaws. It's just one of my flaws, I guess.
Yeah.
But
now, are you watching this on DVD, or are you watching it on Blu-ray, or
I'm streaming it from Amazon
you're
Prime.
streaming it from? Okay, because I just got I finally upgraded from DVD for my Tennant years. They just came out with this new complete David Tennant set, so I cracked it open, and it looks really good on Blu-ray.
Does it really?
So I highly recommend if you have the means, pick it up. It's worth the upgrade.
I might have to do that.
The colors pop more. You can see a lot more detail, obviously being HD, and it's still not quite built yet for the production isn't quite up to speed for HD filming in a lot of ways, but it does help.
Yeah, you can definitely see that.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to have to. I've been putting that off for a long time. Like I don't want to take up shelf space and spend the money, but man, it's Doctor Who. I really should pony up.
It's a good investment. I recommend it.
So we have a base Under Siege stories, are some of my favorite stories. We have that clean white base, which I guess they got a lot of inspiration from NASA for this.
Right.
I'd have to say as far as the cast goes, Lindsay Duncan for me is the standout. I love her. I first saw her in this episode actually, but I've seen her since. And I guess the one that the performance that stuck out for me was that Black Mirror episode. I don't know if you've seen that.
I have not seen that. I know she was in it, but I haven't seen that one.
Okay. If you don't want to be severely disturbed, you might want to skip that one.
You could say that about a lot of Black Mirror, actually.
Yeah, this one in particular, especially if you're an animal lover, I would just stay away from that.
Just read the Wikipedia entry. And
yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure there's a lot of listeners who've seen it that would agree with me.
Right. Do you remember the title of that by any chance?
Oh no!
If not, we can look. I'm sure we can look it up. So
I could think of a name for it, but we probably can't say it on a family-friendly show.
Got it.
She's absolutely wonderful as that stern, authoritative figure. She's someone that you just wouldn't want to take any S from, and the doctor seems to recognize that pretty quickly, and he has to handle her in a different way than he might handle another companion, I think.
Yeah, she's a very believable captain. Like you said, she's authoritative. I think a lot of the crew gets frustrated with her because she's so steadfast when it comes to the rules. She's all like no joking on an open comm or no fun, and just do your job and stick to the mission. She's very task oriented.
Yeah, and you have to be. It's life or death.
Exactly, and she's in charge, so she's responsible for everybody. So she's just like, okay, you clowns, look. I need you to do your jobs. And I'm sorry you don't like me, but I'm here to help keep you alive out here in space. So that's that kind of give and take you have to, with especially being in that kind of supervisory position, especially with something like space travel and exploration.
And keeping everybody alive.
Exactly.
For sure. As far as David Tennant goes, this is a great performance from him, and I kind of want to save some of that talk for the Time Lord Victorious, but he was great. One of his best performances, especially in his interactions with Adelaide.
Now, one of the things I find interesting about the 10th Doctor in this one, he's initially hesitant about helping them, especially once he finds out after talking with them, and he kind of understands who they are. And, this is Bowie Base 1, and he has these little flashes back to apparently their Wikipedia entries where, or at least, some little like online synopsis of their lives. Little
2059's version of
the 2059 Wikipedia entry. And that's used as a storytelling device to kind of explain, to kind of show also the digression that happens, the change when the timeline gets altered.
Yeah,
And
it's a great way of providing exposition
exactly,
for sure.
without even going into detail, because it's right there. So
Yeah.
unless you're, visually challenged, you get that information given to you. So, but the Doctor knows that all these crew members are doomed to die. They die in space, and especially Adelaide. Her death inspires her daughter to go out and explore space,
Her granddaughter,
and her
actually, I
grand,
think.
and also her. I think it was also her
Oh,
granddaughter.
okay.
I
Oh,
think it
yeah,
was
yeah.
both of them, and
Oh, you're right. You're
and
right. Yeah.
it kind of becomes this family lineage of space explorers. So, and it all starts with Adelaide, and the Doctor even runs that down with Adelaide later in the episode. So, so as far as he's concerned, this is a fixed point in time. So we definitely get that thrown at us. The whole fixed point in time concept. This can't be altered. This has to happen. And so that's what makes it all the more shocking that the Doctor is willing to break that rule
Yeah,
to
well,
suit his own ends. And obviously, we're going to talk about that later.
maybe he was trying to make Donna proud.
I think. Well, you know what? Now that you mention it, since we're kind of on the topic of the Doctor, I think that has a lot to do with it because if you notice, the Doctor makes this reference to Adelaide about the fires of Pompeii. You're like, what would happen if it was Pompeii and you had to try to save everybody? And I think that episode really affected him.
Yeah.
With Donna, because Donna had to point out, hey, look, you can't just, let this be a fixed point in time. These are living people. We're in a position to help them. We should help them. And there was that whole ethical dilemma of that. And here he's kind of faced with a similar dilemma of, here's these people here in Bowie Base 1. The web of time tells me I can't alter their deaths. These have to happen. But I think he's thinking back to something like Pompeii. And
he took the wrong lesson from that.
Right. Right.
As he says at the end, they were little people, which was just horrible for the Doctor to say, in my opinion.
Exactly. Very elitist and, condescending and very uncharacteristic, I think, for the Doctor. But my point is that I think, he was thinking about that, and it's kind of running through his mind throughout most of this episode, so that when he finally can't hear the screams anymore of everyone dying and trying to survive the flood, he finally breaks, and everything that results from that. So, but again, like you said, it's a great performance from Tennant. You saw the conflict in his eyes and in his behavior, and I think it was a simple question of no more. Once again, that he couldn't handle it anymore. That he couldn't just stand by and let these people die.
I think that scene with the Doctor when Adelaide stops him from leaving in that airlock,
right?
That was a really scarily understated performance by David Tennant.
Right.
It was just the way that they showed his face, kind of almost distorted
and darkened in the suit.
Yeah. He almost looked like a Vashta Narada in some scenes.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
But
he did almost kind of had that little Vashta Narada vibe. He just like, hey, who turned out the lights? Yeah. But that's a great observation, Lee. So let's talk about some of the other crew. Was there any of the other crew members besides Adelaide that kind of stood out that you found appealing, or they were just there, just expendables waiting to die?
Well, maybe this is not the most popular choice, but I really like Steffi.
Yeah, I did too.
Maybe it's just because she was really cute, but but just her performance, and especially when her time comes, when she's just the way that she has to back into that room, and she knows there's no getting out of it, and it was terrifying to me. I thought that was the scariest death on that in this episode.
I love that scene. I thought it was so powerful because here, like you said, she's trapped in this room. The water's coming down out of the ceiling. She's cut off from the other crew, and so she retreats to this room, and it just happens to be this monitor room where she can look back at her family's message to her. And it makes it all the more poignant when that's the last thing she sees is what she's watching that message, knowing that eventually that water is going to drip down on her and
Yeah.
transform her. And then finally it does as she,
Yeah.
and it's just this horrific, but very powerful end
Yeah.
to her.
And if you want to, I don't know if you want to start talking about the flood or not, but
Yeah. We can talk, start going into that. I know we kind of talked a little bit about the crew. So that's probably a good segue into our second topic. So let's talk about the flood while we're at it.
yeah, the way that transformation takes place is, to me, just along with so many other visual effects in this, was just absolutely just nailed it. It was terrifying the way that their limbs would jerk around, and they would just kind of almost like in the style of like maybe The Ring or The Grudge. It's just with that herky jerky.
It's like almost like they're having a twitchy seizure.
Yeah. That was terrifying.
Like their body's just completely out of the control, and they're just shaking all around. And they're doing the hokey pokey. They're turning themselves about because that's what it's all about.
That is what it's all about.
So, but yeah, it's this, the spasming of their bodies, and it is very creepy, and especially when like in scenes where I want to say it was Maggie. I think that's the one that the first woman that gets transformed early on. She's kind of the one that was kept in the holding cell for quarantine, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So, and the guy watching her, I think it was Yuri or somebody, turns his back on her, and you see her having her spasm as she's transforming behind him.
Yeah.
And it's so subtle and so silent, but it's so menacing because, it's kind of over his shoulder. He's not aware of what's going on. And we're witnessing that. And I think it was very, again, I got to give all the credit to Graham Harper's direction for this. He knows how to, he's not exactly the most innovative director, but he's an effective storyteller. He knows Doctor Who. He knows how to make it menacing. And he certainly did a great job here, in my opinion.
For sure. And in my opinion, given was it 5 episodes of this?
Yeah.
Of this, special season, I would say this episode was like the Caves of Androzani, and then the next 2 were more like, oh gosh, the Twin Dilemma. I mean, it's so obvious.
I don't think it's that bad. I'd say more of what's a good comparison?
Well, to each his own, Charles. To each his own.
Maybe more. I would think more Time Flight.
Okay, I'll give it to you, but I don't know. I'm not a fan of the next.
Well, I had problems with the End of Time as well. So I didn't think it was that great of a finale for David Tennant's era, in my
especially
opinion.
After this, which I guess was supposed to be originally supposed to be the Christmas special, right?
Right.
Red Christmas.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Could you imagine?
Oh my God. Yeah.
So I have a question for you.
Sure, go ahead.
And this is about Maggie, who we were just talking about.
Yeah.
Why do you think it took her so long to turn? Because all of the other, they get a drop or whatever, they get wet, and it was in seconds. And it took a long time for her to finally start a transformation. I was wondering if maybe she was the leader, maybe she was kind of infiltrating and testing the waters with the rest of the crew, testing the waters.
Yeah, I see what you did there.
Yeah, totally not intended. So I don't know. I was just wondering what you thought about that.
I kind of, that's a good. Go ahead.
I also noticed that when she screams, that's when the others start to listen.
Right.
She also didn't have the white eyes like the rest of them did. So I was wondering if maybe she was their leader.
That's a good observation. You're absolutely right about that. About her not having the same eyes like the others. I don't know if she was the leader, but I think it was more of that scream to call the others. I think it was more of, because they're linked, they're connected. That's my theory, and so I have to think that she had to let them know where she was. So I think it was more for to give them her location,
but not like a hive mind. You wouldn't say.
maybe. I mean, we don't really get to understand the mechanics of how the flood work, but and I really think this is a villain that is ripe for being brought back in a sequel at some point.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is, I mean, there's a lot of potential to this villain, I think, this particular villain. And if they did have a hive mind, I mean, it would make sense that, hey, we're working together. I'm on the inside, you're on the outside. Let me tell you where I am so that you can come find me and we can, be reunited for some reason. Or just, I can, maybe she was communicating vulnerabilities to the others so that they could figure out how to get inside.
That's kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah, so it's kind of hard. As for why it took her a while, I don't know. Maybe it was Maggie was able to resist a little longer than the guys. Maybe just, I mean, she is biologically she's a woman, so she's maybe it was just that women are able to resist a little longer than men, perhaps.
Could be.
I mean, without getting an explanation, I'm just
Yeah.
obviously spitballing here, but
Maybe it's just because the plot needed it to
and
ratchet up the tension.
yes, there is that. So I guess my attempt at being delicate here, probably just fell and completely crashed to the ground.
Occam's razor.
Occam's razor. The simplest explanation is always the best. Yes. Yes, it's probably the fact that for the story to be more menacing, it made more sense to kind of draw out her transformation. But hey, that's never happened in Doctor Who before, ever.
Oh, no.
No.
Or anything.
Or
Yeah.
anything, yeah, exactly. So, but that's okay. So I'm willing to overlook it. But if you're looking for a technical reason, I would go with just her gender as a starting point. And we'll see.
I'll take it.
Yeah. All right. Anything else about the flood? We kind of talked. It's interesting that they kind of reference the Ice Warriors a little bit because obviously they're both monsters on Mars. But I don't know how much the flood has to do with the Ice Warriors. Were you when you first watched this story, and obviously having your background, were you disappointed that the Ice Warriors didn't have a direct connection to the flood?
Not really.
Or vice versa.
I was pretty satisfied that they were mentioned. I thought it was subtle enough, and it wasn't like shoving it down your throat. Ice Warriors, Ice Warriors.
Right.
Just hey, maybe this affected them. Maybe they bailed because of this. Who knows?
Yeah.
But it was fine with me. I think it would have taken too much attention away from the episode itself if they started to dwell on the Ice Warriors.
Right. Now, I mean, as for me, I didn't really see a problem with not linking the two directly because if you think about it, look at how many Doctor Who monsters are on Earth.
Yeah.
And they don't interact. Like, they don't have a direct connection to one another, a lot of them. So there's absolutely no reason why the Ice Warriors have to be connected to them somehow just because they're on the same planet. There's millions of animals here on the planet that, they don't have, they're not directly connected to other animals. So it's certainly, I don't think there was a reason for it. But it was nice at least that the Ice Warriors were referenced.
Yeah.
And now maybe at some point in the future, like in a sequel, we could have some kind of like the Ice Warriors and the Flood.
Sure, like an offshoot.
Or like maybe there's an Ice Warrior, little offshoot colony or whatever that is being threatened by the Flood when the Doctor arrives. So there would at least be a little connection there to kind of see these two monsters in the same story, but I don't think it's required to.
I think if an Ice Warrior was infected, it would pretty much look the same except for the water, right? Because they have all the cracked
cracked face. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I don't know. Like, given the fact that the water seems to want to, and at least in this episode, it wants humans. It wants to go to Earth where there's a lot more water.
Right.
At least that's the hypothesis.
I thought that was a good motivation for making Earth a target for the Flood.
Right, and I just don't see...
And raising the stakes of the story.
Right.
Yeah.
And unless the Ice Warriors, were heading to Earth, I just can't see why the water or the Flood would want to infect an Ice Warrior, frankly.
Right. Because it's not really, there's not much water there anyway. So
Right.
yeah. Earth is obviously going to be a tastier target for them.
Sure. Or go to Neptune.
Yeah, exactly. And especially now that they know about Earth.
Right.
Now that maybe it'll be at some point, they'll keep that memory again. There's a lot of sequel potential here. As a writer, I'm just like, I kind of want to develop them a little bit more. I think they're ripe for potential. But
totally, you could go down a rabbit hole with the Flood.
Exactly, but a very interesting villain, and especially if it's like kind of a hive mentality, it makes them more menacing. That they're working in tandem, and obviously it was a very formidable threat. The simple fact of and it's one of the things that Doctor Who does so well is take everyday objects and make them scary as hell.
Yeah, and water in and of itself is terrifying.
Exactly.
I mean, personally, I grew up terrified of water. I almost drowned twice when I was a kid, and it just, I've always had a fear of the water, even in a swimming pool. I could swim,
So you're kind of a hydrophobe then?
I don't know if I'd go that far, but, water's always held a strange fascination and fear. Like if I go to the ocean at night, and I'm walking along the beach and just looking out at the blackness of the ocean. Right. There's just something really
dark and mysterious,
really
about
dark and visceral to that,
Yeah.
So I think,
to watching this story for the first time, did that really freak you out because of that?
Oh, this whole episode scared the crap out of me, which is why I love it. I mean, that's a great thing for me.
Right.
Doctor, you could take my favorite show and then add these elements of horror. You got me.
Yeah. Well, and I've always felt, and I've talked about this on the podcast over and over, I personally feel that the scarier the Doctor Who is, the better Doctor Who is.
Absolutely. So, we're on the same page.
So I'm all for the scares. I'm all for the creepiness. It's great to have the jokes and whatnot to lighten the mood here and there, but I like me some creepy Doctor Who. That's how I'm built. Because my first encounter was the Seeds of Doom, and with Tom Baker, and the scenes where you've got like guys transforming into plant monsters, and how cool that was. That whole body horror thing. So I'm all about Doctor Who being that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the best eras of Doctor Who is the Hinchcliffe era.
Exactly.
And I think this brings it back.
It does. You're right. It is very evocative of the hint. You could easily see this being a Tom Baker story.
Totally. Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with that. Totally. Now, let's see. Anything else about the Flood before we move on?
I don't think so, no.
All right. So topic number 3. This is the big one. The Time Lord Victorious, where everybody's favorite cutesy doctor with the big spiky hair goes all Dark Phoenix on us and goes down that road to becoming the Valyard at some point. So
I didn't even think about that. Yeah,
but yeah, this is where the darkest elements of the Doctor really come out, and I have to think if any of his other incarnations were around when this happened, they would have been jumping him all over. They would have been all over him for this, for behaving this way, especially if it was like the first Doctor or, some of the others. But I have to think that they would have just been appalled by the 10th Doctor's behavior in this one.
Yeah, I didn't really recognize this Doctor at the end of this episode. I was like, who is this guy? And
what have you done to our hero?
I liked it, but at the same time, I thought it was in the episode anyway. It was a bit over the top. But
do you think they went too far with it?
I think they did. I think him making that decision to save who he could save.
Right.
I was fine with that. What I didn't like was his. This was David Tennant in his most smug, his most arrogant. I shouldn't say David Tennant. David Tennant's a lovely fellow.
Right, he is. I've met him in person. I have his autograph, so he's such a pleasant guy. But he's playing a role, and the role he was asked to play in this story, I I mean, I'm sure he loved the idea of like, hey, I'm putting a spin on the Doctor that I've been playing for the past few years,
Sure. I
and,
mean,
and
it
giving
was,
him a little different dark edge.
yeah, and it had been building up to this, I think,
Yeah,
for a while.
right.
But I think that his whole, nobody can stop me. I say what happened. I think that was just a bit much. Like, come on, man.
Well, I mean, this Doctor, the 10th Doctor's always had a huge ego,
True.
and probably the only one with a bigger ego has to be, of course, the 6th Doctor, Colin Baker. But 10th Doctor has a bit of an ego, and he's a bit full of himself. And like you said, he's arrogant as hell in this story. He, he's so confident, and he's being so like smugly overconfident. He's basically like daring, the events to throw more at him. He's like, I can, whatever it is, I can handle it. I can solve it. I've got this. And we like it when the Doctor's confident, but we don't like it when the Doctor is cocky
Mm-hmm.
and
Agreed.
and arrogant and just completely egocentric. We don't like that, and so that's why it's much more of a shock when this happens. Even Adelaide, who hasn't really known the Doctor all that long, by the end of the story, she's going, "I don't even recognize you, dude."
Yeah. And
the Time Lord Victorious is wrong.
Absolutely. And I think about where his headspace is at the end of this episode, and what events could possibly have made him see the error of his ways. What could have, I guess, kind of given him a wake-up call to what he's doing.
Right.
I mean, suicide is a pretty good wake-up call.
I would think. You mean, yeah, because I mean, is it? It's obviously it was something that the 10th Doctor didn't anticipate, was that Adelaide would go into her apartment and kill herself. Now, obviously, it's off screen,
right?
But it's very heavily implied. That's what happened. And we even get the little Wikipedia entry that says, "Oh, she died on Earth." So we know she's dead. We heard the laser blast, so we have to assume that she killed herself,
right?
Without actually seeing it. So we have to take it on faith, and it's something that the Doctor, it does snap him out of his little egomania.
Right. I have to wonder if that was if it had to go that far. I liked it. Don't get me wrong, but I don't know if it had to go that far. I think for the kiddies, that's a bit troubling.
I agree, and like I said, I made this point earlier in our discussion that there had to be an alternative. She didn't have to kill herself. She could have just said, "Okay, I'm just going to never be seen again.
Yeah,
I'm going to go live on an island somewhere, and everybody's going to think I'm dead when I'm not dead."
Easier said than done, though. I don't know if there's any right decision here.
Yeah,
which I think is one of the great things about it.
Yeah, I mean, it does present there's a lot of great moral dilemmas in this one, and it's probably why it's a very it's a difficult story in a lot of ways to talk about, but personally I find that more intriguing because there's a lot of moral ambiguity going on here. But now the Adelaide suicide, it kind of snapped, like we talked about, snaps the Doctor back a little bit. He kind of realizes, I've gone too far this time. And so he has, I don't know if I don't think I would say remorse that he's feeling here, but it's more of like a realization.
Right. I didn't get the feeling that he was feeling remorse at all.
No.
Especially when, after he confronts the Ood that was or wasn't there.
Right.
And he gets in the TARDIS and he says no, and he just takes off. I got the feeling like he was still being defiant and stubborn at that point.
And I agree. I did get that feeling of defiance. Because we hear the cloister bell sound, and normally that's like the TARDIS going, dude.
Yeah.
Slow down. Think about
bad stuff's happening. Yeah.
This is bad stuff. Exactly. So, so the TARDIS is trying to warn him, but like you said, he's being defiant, and he's just, flying off to who knows where in time and space, at least until he meets up with the Master again. And He is being defiant. He knows his end is coming, and now after seeing the Ood, he's kind of reminded of that. But so he's just. Is it just because, and in the End of Time kind of addressed this a little bit, is it mostly his fear of dying? Because I think that's where some of this is coming from, his fear of death.
Sure, absolutely. And not only is he facing death, he's just relative for a Time Lord. It hasn't been that long since the Time War. And I feel like in this episode, what's come to a head is the stages of grief, right? It's almost like he's reached the anger stage and the denial stage all at once. And it's just like a hurricane. Yes.
Yeah, that's a great point. I haven't really connected it to the stages of grief, but I think it's the stages of his impending regeneration.
And the death of his people.
Right. And even because even at the end, in the End of Time, when he regenerates, he said his last words, "I don't want to go."
Right.
So there is still a little bit of that defiance there, but it's not really. He didn't really hit the acceptance stage, I don't think.
No, definitely not.
Yeah, but it's kind of still, regardless, it turned out it was very interesting. Anything else about the story you want to talk about?
I don't think so. Again, one of my favorites.
The gadget robot, robot.
I was really hoping we could avoid that, Charles. I was watching.
You're the one who suggested the episode, so
I was watching this with my girlfriend, and she's seen a few episodes and she likes it. Okay.
Is it? Did it kind of embarrass you a little bit that the gadget robot? I'm sorry, you have to see this.
Actually, I don't know, and I'll tell you why. She's a fan of the 13th Doctor. She really loves the new.
Great, that's
the
great.
New Doctor.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'll take it. I'll take the win. But I said I have to watch this for the podcast. She's like, it's cool. I'll sit here and watch it with you. And she played with her phone while I was watching it and everything. And then I was watching a bit of the.
You didn't look over and catch her peeking and watching the episode a little bit?
No, well, yes, I did actually a few times, but I knew she wouldn't be. But I was watching a little bit of The Confidential, just kind of in the background, and we were getting ready to leave, and they were talking about Gadget, and she was like, "Oh, the Gadget thing's pretty cool," and I was like, "I hate it." She's like, "Oh, well, then I hate it too." It's like, thank you for being supportive. But yeah, that's. I mean, the robot itself was okay, but the whole gadget thing, I was kind of cringe. But I guess they got to throw that in there for the kids, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I think. Yeah. I think. I mean, considering that, hey, they had a suicide in the episode, they probably had to balance that somewhat.
Yeah, maybe just don't let your kids watch this one.
Yeah, maybe that's a good idea.
I mean, I would have had nightmares. Yeah, probably even in my teens, I would have had nightmares of those faces. Those were the most terrifying things.
Right, exactly.
I've ever seen.
Spewing water out of their mouths, like it's.
Oh man!
Like they're fire hoses.
Right. Those special
just
effects.
Spewing out. Yeah.
When I was watching it, I was writing notes and I was like, how did they do this? How did they make? What were the special effects for this? And of course, I went and watched the making of afterwards, and I was like, oh, that's how they did it. Cross that off my notes. But
I'm guessing wasn't it just that they had tubes and they kind of covered it up with the makeup and it made it look like it was coming in their mouths, but it was actually probably like kind of out of the side of their mouth,
right, kind of squirting sideways. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, it's still a very cool makeup and a very original, at least I think, Doctor Who monster.
Definitely.
Yeah. And like I said, I want to see the Flood back. I think that's a great villain to bring back, a great monster to bring back.
Yeah, I think they should actually come back to Earth.
All right. So if there's nothing else, do you have any favorite quotes from this story?
Oh boy, there's not a lot of humor in this one. But I think I will say that I really liked in the beginning when Adelaide, when the doctor says to Adelaide, would you please put this gun down? And she's like, oh, you'd like that. And he's like, can you show me somebody that wouldn't? That was a really good point.
It is a good point.
And of course, there's the line about I hate robots and Yuri. Was it no?
I hate funny robots. Yes.
Yeah, and Roman says something like, I had I know a girl who dressed herself like a dog, and he's like, well, dogs are different. And I was
Yeah.
like, yeah, canine.
That's right. It would be a little tad hypocritical if he criticized robot
Yeah,
dogs.
exactly. Because that's what I was thinking. I was like, dude, what are you talking about?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, weren't you the one petting the tin dog going,
Right.
K9? Yeah, in school reunion. Yeah. All right. The ones I liked, the beginning where he kind of introduces himself to Captain Adelaide Brooke. She goes, state your name, rank, and intention. And he goes, the doctor. Doctor. Fun. So
I love that.
very clever. I like that. Another one where Adelaide Brooke notices the sonic screwdriver. And so she goes, what's that device? And he goes, screwdriver. And then he goes, are you the doctor or the janitor? And the doctor replies, I don't know. Sounds like me, the maintenance man of the universe.
Yeah, it was great.
I
thought about that one too.
So I thought that's a good, nice little description of the doctor. Adelaide later in the story where Adelaide says, we're safe. It's hermetically sealed. They can't get in. And then the doctor discusses water. He says, water is patient, Adelaide. Water just waits. Wears down the cliff tops, the mountains, the whole of the world. Water always wins. So I thought that was good. And then lastly, the doctor telling Adelaide, Adelaide, I've done this sort of thing before in small ways, save some little people. And again, there's that little people arrogance. But never someone as important as you. Oh, I'm good. And Adelaide, understandably offended by this, goes, little people? What, like Mia and Yuri? Who decides they're so unimportant? You? And the doctor goes, for a long time, I thought I was just a survivor, but I'm not. I'm the winner. That's who I am, the Time Lord victorious. And Adelaide says, and there's no one to stop you.
I saved that one for you because that's the obvious one from the episode. That was great. That whole sequence.
Yes. I mean, stellar acting between these two.
Oh yeah.
Very, very powerful scene, and I love Adelaide's defiance. Here she's seen the doctor do all this incredible stuff, and she's still willing to stand up to him. So credit to her, I think.
Yeah, and Lindsay Duncan will make anyone raise their game.
She's
fantastic.
Pretty much. Yeah, like I said, I loved her in Rome. She's fantastic in that. So if you haven't seen HBO's Rome, I highly recommend it. A lot of great actors out of that one. All right, what's your rating for this one?
I'm going to give this one a 9 out of 10. 9 out of 10. 9 out of 10 gadgets.
Nice.
Yeah.
You kind of stole mine.
I know. I went ironic on that one because I hate gadgets.
Yeah, exactly. That was unexpected. Let's see, what's a good one I can do here? I'm gonna give this 8.5. So I'm a little bit under you on this one, but I really enjoy this one. 8.5 out of 10. Cracked faces.
Very good.
All right. So in honor of the flood. So now reverse the polarity. So obviously we're in the, we got to actually reverse the polarity back because this is a modern episode. So we're going to reverse the polarity to all the way back. I'm going to recommend if you enjoy The Waters of Mars, go back to 1977 with The Invisible Enemy.
Oh.
Yeah. This is the second serial of season 15 in 1977, written by Bob Baker and Dave Martin, the creators of K9, because, hey, this is the first K9 story. Now, the reason I chose this, so we have, in the year 5000, the Fourth Doctor and Leela are traveling through a region of space where a strange virus has infected a human colony called Titan Base. So we have a base under siege, taking it over as a breeding ground. The TARDIS is infected by the virus, which passes to the Doctor, but he's unaffected. He and Leela hear a distress call sent by Titan's Base's station manager, Lowe, and they go to investigate. At Titan Base, the Doctor is overcome by repeated infections and is chosen, due to his incredible powers as a Time Lord, to be the host of the nucleus of the swarm. So Leela is unable to become infected, however, so the nucleus declares her a reject and orders that she be killed. The Doctor breaks free of his infection and tells Leela how to get the TARDIS to the nearest medical station. Accompanying them is Lowe, who, unknown to the Doctor and Leela, has also been infected. So essentially we have infected people being taken over, kind of like the flood, treated as an infection in this, in the waters of Mars. At the medical station, the doctor's doctor, Professor Marius, introduces the group to Canine, a robotic dog he made to replace the real dog he had to leave on Earth. So we got a funny little robot and Canine. Professor Marius is puzzled how to treat the doctor's infection while Lo goes around infecting the entire hospital staff. Leela and the doctor create clones of themselves which can only survive for 10 minutes. So those are shrunk and inserted into the doctor while the real Leela and Canine fight off the infected staff of the hospital. The doctor's clone and Leela's clone are separated inside the doctor's mind. And the doctor's clone reaches the nucleus but has no weapons to destroy it. Great plan. And the doctor and the nucleus learns the clone's intended escape route through the tear ducts. So realizing the doctor has been cured of his infection, Professor Marius retrieves something from the doctor's tear duct and expands it to human size. But turns out to be the nucleus. The nucleus, now ginormous size, and the infected staff leave for Titan Base so the nucleus can spawn. After being cured because Leela's clone introduced her immunity factor into his bloodstream, the doctor replicates it and gives it to Professor Marius, while the doctor, Leela, and Canine head to Titan Base in the TARDIS. There they fight off the infected humans, but are again without sufficient weaponry to destroy the nucleus or its many children, which are about to hatch macro-sized, like the macro-sized nucleus. The doctor jams the door to block the swarm, rigs a gun into a cloud of oxygen and gas he releases, and escapes. As intended, when the swarm finally reaches the door, they force the door open, the blaster fires, igniting the oxygen in Titan's methane atmosphere and destroying the swarm and the base. So essentially, this base goes boom, just like in Waters of Mars. Returning to the hospital, they thank Professor Marius for the use of Canine and learn Marius is due to return to Earth. Professor Marius offers Canine to the Doctor and Leela, who leave with their new companion in the TARDIS. So a much happier ending.
Wow, I'd forgotten how similar those were.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I know that The Invisible Enemy, it's not exactly one of the more highly regarded stories from the classic era, but thematically, I think they're pretty similar.
Definitely. I thought you were going to go the obvious route with an Ice Warrior story, but you zagged instead of zigged.
That's what I do here.
Very good.
Just to try to keep you on your toes. Sometimes I try to be obvious, sometimes not so much. So we do have some listener feedback, and we have a lot of listener feedback. A lot of people wanted to write in about the Waters of Mars. So apparently you picked a popular one. So first person writing in, we have David Proctor, who writes in, says, I enjoyed this episode. I especially enjoy the Doctor testing his boundaries. He is learning the difference between actual limitations and imposed limitations on why some limitations are imposed. An example of just because you can doesn't mean you should. Often rules like that we don't like are imposed for reasons we don't know. The tragic part of this episode will live on and be part of the Doctor's accumulated guilt. And oh my God, that's a lot of guilt. No excuses. I haven't really recently rewatched this, and my recollection may be flawed. Still, I remember this being a good episode in the sense of being well written, not predictable, and it makes you think. Keep up the good work. David K. Proctor from Colorado. So thanks, David, for writing in. Always great to hear from you. I had a little hydrate after this. Also writing in, we haven't heard from him for a while, but Paul Beck from Australia writes in. So welcome back, Paul. He goes, hi, Charles and Lee.
Hey, Paul.
So, yeah, Paul's giving Lee the shout out here. I really like this episode. David Tennant does such an impressive acting display as the Time Lord Victorious, proving once again that the Doctor should never travel through time and space alone! ! ! ! His companions act as his moral compass, which a lot of them, especially like Donna, have pointed out. This episode starts off with a sense of joy from the Doctor, and slowly through the course of the show, it gets darker by the minute as he explores the last day of Bowie Base 1 and the creepy water threat. His solution to changing a fixed point in time certainly does not leave him victorious in the end. He tries and fails, leaving him rather crushed. Sending you both my kindest regards, Paul. P.S. Even though I have been unable to email as much as I would like, I've been listening as always, and the shows have been, in a word, brilliant. Keep up the good work! ! So thank you, Paul, and it's always appreciative when you can write in. I loved hearing from you, and thanks for the kind words, because we really appreciate it. And Jesse and I and all the other special guest companions, we try to make the show a lot of fun and try to have that sense of community. And I hope Lee will agree with me on this, and we really appreciate all the fans out there supporting
Thank you,
the show.
Paul.
Yep. So thanks for that. And lastly, but certainly not leastly, Holly Mack writes in. Holly from Wisconsin writes in.
Holly.
Yeah, one of our favorite people here on Next Stop Everywhere writes in, "Hey, Charles and Lee. The story gives whole new meaning to Don't Drink the Water. Also love the nod to David Bowie with the Mars base being named Bowie. Of course, because, hey, it's David Bowie and, like Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars.
Life on Mars, right?
Life on Mars, you name it. But I'm a big Bowie fan, so I appreciated that from the get-go. I remember reading somewhere that when this episode first came out that it was done as a nod to him, to Bowie. Big-time kudos to the makeup and special effects departments for the creepy makeup and the water dripping from the faces. Gadget was an interesting robot helper."
Interesting for sure.
Interesting. That's an interesting word. Interesting here. Yeah, exactly. The Time Lord victorious and the Doctor getting a bit too big for his britches, and also being nervous about Ood Sigma and the knock 4 times prophecy that his end is near. Yeah, he gets all arrogant about that one too, doesn't he? He's he says I'm waiting for knocking 4 times, and I don't hear any knocking. And then all of a sudden he hears this boom, 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 and it's like 3 knocks. That's all you get. Let's see, but he says the Doctor wanted to save Adelaide from her fixed point in time, and even being a little proud of the fact that there's no other Time Lords to stop him. I don't think little is the word I would use as far as his pride here.
Yeah.
Shows A, how far he's lost control, or B, how scared out of his mind he is about regenerating and him actually going through and breaking the fixed point in time for the most part successfully. I would suggest C, all the above. The Doctor has told his companions many times before that a fixed point in time can't be changed, and here he is changing it and not really thinking that it will have any consequences to suffer. That turns out not to be the case when Adelaide decides to take her own life after surviving and returning to Earth, and then when the Doctor enters the TARDIS yet again he hears the cloister bells ringing, which is never a good sign. I'll wrap it up here, Holly from Wisconsin. So, thank you, Holly. Another great email, and a lot of feedback on this one. I'm glad everybody is enjoying this one, and I think Lee picked another winner to talk about.
Thank you.
So if you want to be like David, Holly, and of course Paul from Australia, please write to us. Next Stop Everywhere, smg@gmail.com. That's Next Stop Everywhere, SMG. The SMG is, of course, for Southgate Media Group at gmail.com. Or reach us on the Twitter machine at Next Stop SMG on Twitter, or on Facebook, Next Stop Everywhere, the Doctor Who Podcast, or on Instagram at Next Stop Everywhere Podcast. Now, Lee, where can they reach you on the interwebs?
You can see, my Facebook profile is like Lee Linus 75. I think if you want to come check me out there, not doing a whole lot, just, crawling and stalking mostly.
Are you lurking mostly on Twitter?
Yes, lurking. Yeah, that's a better way to put it. I mostly post stuff about the band. We're still out there playing music.
Why don't you hype your band?
We actually just had to part ways with our singer.
Oh, no.
It was amicable. So we're out there looking for a singer. So if anybody, wants to come sing in the Pittsburgh area, we are at silencefollowsband@gmail.com. Shoot us an email. Let us know. Otherwise, things are going rock and rolling as usual.
Excellent. Well, keep it up, and good luck on finding a new singer.
Thank you.
So, all right. I wish I could sing. I don't.
Yeah, you want to come try out?
I sing horribly. Yeah, sure. If you want a singer that sings horribly, I'm right. I'm your guy, man.
Hey, Neil Young made a living.
This is true.
I love Neil Young.
Keep on rocking in the free world. That's true. I guess if he could do it, no, I can't do it. I'm horrible. I suck. So, but otherwise, yeah. Please check out Lee on Twitter and drop him a line if you're so inclined, because his band needs a new singer, you guys. So help
Just
him
say
out.
hi.
Just say hi. Just drop him a line. Tell him how awesome he is for doing Next Stop Everywhere, if nothing else. As for me, of course, at Charles Skaggs on Twitter, at Charles Skaggs on Instagram, Facebook, of course, Charles Skaggs in Hilliard, Ohio, and my blog of geeky things. Wait for the phone app.
Damn good coffee. And hot.
Damn good coffee and hot, where I talk about all the stuff we talk about here on Next Stop Everywhere. Comics news, sci-fi news of my other podcasts I do for Southgate Media, including, of course, the Phantom Zone podcast that I do with Jesse Jackson right now, where we're going through HBO's Watchmen. So if you're a fan of that show, it's been a lot of fun. And we recorded our second episode of that today, so that'll be up here tomorrow. Obviously, there'll be the 11th tomorrow, I believe, so of November. So look for that. Please check that out, because we're having a ball doing that. Titan Talk, the Titans podcast, where we're reviewing the DC Universe series Titans, and that show's winding down. But for right now, we'll be building that up, and probably going to have DJ Nick back on for our Titans Season 2 wrap-up episode 50. So stay tuned for that. And, of course, Ghost with the Twin Peaks podcast to do with Zan Sprouse, whom many of you have heard here on Next Stop Everywhere. You know how lovely she is. We have a ball talking Doctor Who and also Twin Peaks. And so on Ghostway, we talk Twin Peaks, David Lynch, and as usual, all kinds of pop culture references all over the place. So please check out those podcasts, because I would definitely appreciate it. And please tell your friends about us, too. That would be great if you could. Otherwise, thank you, everybody, for listening. I personally appreciate it. Lee, thank you so much for coming back. I know
Thank you, Charles.
It's been a while. I hope you had a lot of fun. I had fun talking to you.
I did. I always have fun. Thank you for dragging me through this one. I've been pretty under the weather today. So.
Yeah. So, well, hopefully you cheer up a little bit. Hopefully you're feeling a little better now.
Yeah, I got to head to band practice now. So it's a long night.
The chores of a musician.
Yeah.
But it's rock and roll, man. You got to do it for the rock and roll.
Yeah, you got to. Sick, not sick, doesn't matter.
That's right, but that's all right. Sometimes artists they kind of transfer their pain into energy, and so if you're not feeling good, just rock out, and hopefully that'll help your spirits.
Sleep for 14 hours.
There you go. That'll probably help too. So everybody, thank you so much for listening. Next time at Next Stop Everywhere, Jesse's back for our third and final part of our little Big Finish 10th Doctor Adventures Volume 3 little mini marathon that we're doing often, once a month. We're finishing up, of course, with the new David Tennant story, The Creeping Death, which is a great title. I love the title. Haven't listened to the audio yet, so I'm looking forward to that. And then Jesse will be back in December of 2019. We've already picked out our episode, and it's a Christmas episode. So that'll be our last story for the year. I'm not going to say yet just which one it is, but we're going to be. Our goal is to even if we don't get a Doctor Who Christmas special this year, Next Stop Everywhere is going to release a Doctor Who Christmas special. So keep looking at your feeds on December 25th, 2019. We hope to have a little something for you guys to kind of fill in the gap a little bit. So everybody, thank you so much again. And Lee, thank you. And we'll see you next time right here. Next Stop Everywhere, the Doctor Who podcast.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.